Before we start tonight's program, we remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and or mental health regime. Because as we normally do, we will address things related to addiction and other facets of life's journeys, and also a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion, as always, is advised. Importantly, if you're feeling suicidal crisis or emotional distress and need to be put in touch with a crisis center, call a suicide prevention lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or you can text the word HOME to 741-741. Those resources are available 24/7, 365. Moreover, if you need to contact the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for generalized help with respect to mental health or substance abuse, you can contact 1-800-662-HELP. It's 1-800-662-4357. And then I would not have a disclaimer without talking about something that has been near and dear in my heart for the last 19 months, and quite frankly, the last 11 years. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis, as you know, is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Importantly, we are still raising money for the National MS Society through A Venture to a Cure. This page was created in conjunction with the Walk MS 2022 that was held in media back in April. The fundraising page for A Venture to a Cure is located at rebrand.ly/A Venture to a Cure. Once again, rebrand.ly/A Venture to a Cure. That fundraising effort will continue through the end of September. Thank you. Thank you for all of you who have gone to the National MS Society to learn more about multiple sclerosis or demyelination, or have even donated to the National MS Society. It touches me and over to 1 million people in this country who have multiple sclerosis in so many ways, and we appreciate all of you. And on that, let's talk. Tonight, we talk about goals. Now, we've talked about challenges before on the show, but a goal is something that is a little more directive, that talks about maybe a series of many things that form that goal, a series of objectives, a series of tasks, basically a story. And that's what this show is. It's a collection of stories that have been pertaining to my journey. Tonight we're going to go over goals and how we craft better goals for ourselves so we can live the best possible life we can. This is The Venture Forward. Good evening once again, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of alcoholism, overeating, obesity, and compulsive gambling, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. And before we begin, moment of honesty, as we are good for that every now and then, all the time on this show. What am I talking about? I have a certain feline in this house, a certain kitten who's about a year old, who keeps on crying in the background. And the sounds of her crying in the background, I think, had me a little bit off kilter with the whole preamble and the disclaimer and everything. That's why everything seemed to be out of order. And that's why even since I almost said it's time to talk, which is Matt's line from Friday nights. But yeah, let's begin is more what I say in the beginning of the show. So anyhow, if you're wondering why I'm out of sorts, a little feline named Kitty is Kitty. Wow, Stevie. A little kitten named Stevie is throwing me off kilter, and I can't even get that straight. Anyhow, good to see all of you. Let's see who wins the door prize tonight on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, and that would be Jaden, who says hello. Hello, Jaden. Hope you are well. Hope you have your notes better than mine, for sure. We have Matt, co-host of VF Talks on Friday nights, and also creator of Awesome Wood Things, who says, hey, on YouTube. I say, hey, right back at you. We got Marilyn as well on YouTube, who says, hello, everyone, with 3 waves and 3 purple hearts. Well, 3 waves and 3 blue hearts right back at you. Hope you're doing well this evening. And then we have Jaden going off of his Facebook account, who says, hello. Hello again. Hope you're well. Goals. So we've talked about challenges before on this show, and the one thing I will say is this story has been basically entrenched in goals. But my ultimate disclaimer before we even get started with what we're talking to is you don't want these goals to start coming out of necessity because you've hit bottoms. For example, you don't have to start coming up with a goal to lose 300 plus pounds because you can't walk more than 5 to 10 feet. And oh, by the way, it's the 3rd time you've been morbidly obese. You should really have some sort of construct before that. Same thing with the alcoholism. Whether it is a situation where you're finding that you're drinking every single day and you have a bottle of bourbon next to the coffee maker, or you go out to parties or you go out for dinners and, you've had one too many. That's well past the bottom. That's well past the time where the goal and the objective should have come into play well before that. As far as the gambling, well, I leave it to me to say that a copious amount of 1099 forms and win-loss statements and being in financial peril is far beyond the point where that goal list should have been created. It should have been created a long time ago. So the point of tonight's episode is it's important to have goals, and not necessarily a challenge. We should have goals to drive our lives, whether it is from a mental perspective, from it's a financial perspective, a physical perspective, what have you. We need goals. So that's what tonight's episode is about. It's about goal setting. And we're going to talk about it from a couple different perspectives, but we're also going to talk about what it means for my journey now and what it meant for my journey back 3 years ago and what it can mean for your journey. We'll provide some examples and also some sort of characteristics on how to create the right sort of objective for your goal. We're going to talk about all of that tonight as I try to talk straight here. This is summer episode 22.3, June 28th, 2022. In this episode, it's on goal setting. Revisited. I say revisited because we've talked about goal setting before way back in the day, and we're revisiting it tonight. The rundown for tonight's episode. We're going to start off with language of letting go. And we're going to go through some journal entries over the last few months that talks about goal setting from Melody Beattie's book, Language of Letting Go. We'll get started with that. And then we'll start talking about the difference between a goal and a challenge. It seems like, and we talked about this about a month and a half ago, that the end thing these days is to come up with challenges and challenging us to go do the next best thing. And there's nothing wrong with a challenge. But sometimes it seems like it may be coming from a place where it's not based in any sort of edict for improvement for life or any sort of focus is saying, you know what? I need to lose X sort of pounds. I need to do this. I need to do that. It seems like challenges sometimes are more for amusement than actual gain. Not to say that all challenges are just amusement challenges. There are great gain-based challenges as well, where people learn a lot of things from those challenges. But there's a lot more to say about goals and objectives and getting to that sort of denouement, that sort of conclusion, than just doing a mere challenge. We'll talk about that difference. We'll talk about the characteristics of an optimal objective, because goals are basically constructed out of the objectives and tasks that form the goal. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the goals in this journey, the goals that I've seen thus far, but also the goals that are on the table for the next 6 months, and a bit of a preview of what's going on the next episode. A little bit of a teaser there. And then goals we can all think about. There was an article that was in the New York Post nearly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, before the Backstreet Boys reunion tour. It talked about the goals for 2020. It was basically your typical New Year's Day fodder that you would put in a newspaper or on a television program or on the news. So we're going to go through that list, but we're going to talk about why those goals, just stating them very simplistically, may be a bit off, and how we could work behind the sort of construct about how to make that goal more tangible. So we'll talk about that. Before we end tonight, we'll go back to language of letting go and talk about when things don't work, and reminding ourselves that, hey, we have to be agile in this story. We have to be agile in living our lives. That is very important. And then we're going to have a bit of a preview for the next episode, which won't be Thursday, which won't be next Tuesday. But the next episode will be on July 7th, where I start talking about the book that I'm writing, that I've been talking about for the last 2 years as far as this program. But I'm actually going to talk about certain things that I've actually put in the book as I get closer and closer to publishing. So that will be the episode on July 7th. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the show. Before we go and start, we have Matt, who says, I gamify a lot of things. Gamification's always a good thing. And we also have Jamie on YouTube, who says, hello, everyone, or hey, everyone. Hey, Jamie, hope you are well. So let's get started. And we'll start off with language of letting go. And we're going to do something a little bit different tonight. We're actually going to go off of certain excerpts of two main passages, or 3 excerpts out of 2 main passages of language of letting go, but this has to do with goal setting and the foundations of goals. So the January 1st entry goes something like this. What would you like to have happen in your life this year? What would you like to do, to accomplish? What good would you like to attract into your life? What areas of growth would you like to have happen to you? What blocks or character defects would you like to have removed? What would you like to attain? Little things and big things. Where would you like to go? What would you like to have happen in friendship and love? What would you like to have happen in your family life? What problems would you like to see solved? What decisions would you like to make? What would you like to have happen in your career? Write it down. Take a piece of paper, a few hours of your time, and write it all down as an affirmation of you, your life, and your ability to choose. Then let it go. We're going to talk a little bit about that before the end of the show, about what we need to do as far as coming up with that list. But let's continue. That passage continues to say, goals give us direction. They put a powerful force into play on a universal, conscious, and subconscious level. Goals give our life direction. Both of those passages are from January 1st. On March 9th, we see this. I used to spend so much time reacting and responding to everyone else that my life had no direction. Other people's lives, problems, and wants set the course for my life. Once I realized it was okay for me to think about and identify what I want, remarkable things began to take place in my life. That was from March 9th, and all of that is truly the language of letting go. Let me go back to Maine for a second. Think about that for a second. That bottom passage about how we would basically shift everybody else's priorities in front of ours is codependency in a nutshell. And at the end of the day, we have to take care of ourselves. Our goals make a difference. Our goals and our objectives are very important to us, as we'll talk more to in this episode. We can't forget that. Is it wrong to think about someone else's goals and objectives? Absolutely not. It's absolutely okay. But when push comes to shove, when it comes time for us to be basically fighting for ourselves, we have to fight for ourselves first. So we'll talk about how those goals and objectives come to pass on this episode. We have Austin joining us on YouTube who says, "Hey JV, hey Austin, hope you're having a wonderful evening." So we talked about challenges. Let's identify what the difference between a goal and a challenge actually is. Challenges involve one action that help you achieve what you want. Goals can be an unlimited set of actions, however. We can think of how best to explain our goal and set forth an objective that seems far from arbitrary. Goals are broad. They look at the big picture. They depict where you want to go and what you want to achieve. Objectives in that support those goals. They're specific and measurable. We talk about SMART goals in a little bit. Specific and measurable is part of that. They're the tangible steps you need to take to get to your goal. Goals are obsolete without an objective, though. Where it seems like when you do a challenge, sometimes the wholehearted nature of the challenge may be lost in objective. Goals are basically built on objective. You form objectives, and compass en masse forms the goal that we're trying to set forth to achieve. From there, we should also set forth an explanation and also that of the objective. So explaining why we're doing what we're doing. And of course, what is the objective in that whole sort of general area of the goal? That has to be set forth. But that's different than a challenge where you're just doing 5 or 6 arbitrary things, and maybe the collection of which gives you a better health, a better mind, a better this. But it's not necessarily a goal per se. It's not a goal that's meaningful. It's just a challenge. A goal is something that you took the time to really think out, that you basically crafted on a piece of paper, whether it's 50 or 100 at a time, and you figured out the 5 to 10 that resonated, and you constructed a plan to start tackling those goals. We're going to talk about that in minutes. We talk about these objectives. And within these goals, we have a series of objectives that we try to achieve to. One of those most commonly named objective writing abilities is called SMART. One of those wonderful acronyms, mnemonic rather. It came out of a 1981 issue of Management Review. So of course, this came out of business. But if you think about what a goal and objective sort of rubric looks like, we can apply that to anything. So what is SMART? Well, you're talking about an objective that is smart, that is measurable, that is achievable or attainable, that is relevant, that is time-bound and time-limited. So let's break that down for a second. SMART, obviously, it means that it is relevant for what we're trying to do. Smart in the sense that it means something to our life. Relevant meaning that it is pursuant to what we are doing right now in our life. So the two work in tandem. Measurable meaning there is some way we know whether or not we're moving the yardstick. Whether it is a quantitative sort of measure, but also a qualitative measure as well. As far as achievability and attainability, well, we're not going to say, well, we're going to build pyramids just like the Egyptian pyramids of 9,000 years ago. That's not attainable or achievable. I guess theoretically, if you worked long at it, you might come up with something, but it's not achievable or attainable for what we're trying to do in fixing our lives. And the time-bound, time-limited, put some sort of teeth behind it. For example, if you're looking for a house, you may be saying, I would like to buy a house or get on the process of being in negotiations of buying a house within, say, 90 days or 180 days. 180 days seems a lot more feasible these days, given that we're moving off of a buyer's market now since the interest rates have gone up and everything. There are other mechanisms that we look at SMART as. There's something called CLEAR, which is collaborative, limited, emotional, appreciable, refinable, which is a little bit of a nuance on this. Or we could talk about PURE, which is positively stated, understood, relevant, and ethical. I think the right sort of mechanism is a combination of all three. I never try to write goals that are in a negative. I don't say I will prevent myself from doing something. I always talk about something that is positive that I'm trying to accomplish. That is important. That sort of level of positivity can be extended way past this too. The more we look at these things as something that is always on the good side or the positive sort of outcome of things, the more likely we manifest positive things. You know what happens on the flip of that? The more we look at the negative side of things, the more we manifest negative. So there is no facility or no reason why we should do that. We should try to be as positive can be. Going back to Maine for a second, Jamie had a comment. She said, I always thought the S was specific, the more you know. Well, yes, there was an alternate way of looking at it. Specific could be, but I've seen it looked upon as SMART as well, in the sense that it means something a little more than specificity. Truth be told, I've seen it specific as well. But, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, time-limited. So we talk about recovery a lot on this show. So what would a set of SMART objectives look like with respect to recovery? You could say something like, I will attend at least one meeting or recovery service each week. Well, there's definitely the timeliness of it. Well, I need the relevance cadence of once a week. And then moreover, the importance of being at least one. And also within that sort of goal, you may have within that sort of objective, you may have the reason why you're doing that. To whether to gain information yourself or provide feedback, but also be a sounding board or a solidification for someone else that's in that recovery group. Another one you may look at, which is not necessarily a recovery piece, it could be a business piece as well. I will find a mentor within the next month. When you're well into something, the flip could be, I will mentor someone within the next year. Again, we're talking about the timeliness of the two. You may look at something that if you're having a hard time sleeping at night and you're saying, okay, I'm not going to be sleeping with my phone or my iPad or what have you, you may come up with something that says, I will abide by a self-imposed bedtime every night to regulate my sleeping. You may come up with something like, 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 9:30. Putting something that is specific but also relevant and has a time sort of base to it, saying it's going to be every night, no exceptions, makes the goal SMART. You could say, I will spend 30 minutes doing a craft I enjoy every day. Whether that craft is knitting or doing a live stream or writing a book or what have you. That is important for things that may not necessarily be part of our 9 to 5. But it definitely has to be encompassed because this is who we are. The last one is very important to me because I used to be very guilty of this. I will eat my meals away from my desk every weekday. There are a lot of times where I'm in back-to-backs, especially when you have a telecommuting job and you're finding that you're eating a lot of your meals at your desk. That's not good. It doesn't give you a chance to reset. It doesn't give you a chance to breathe. So to come up with a SMART goal like that really comes up with that sort of sense of, okay, there's a sort of need for me to be away from my workplace, away from that sort of realm for 30 minutes at a time for me to take in a meal, to take in food, to take in nutrition. And then at the end of that, I can go back to it. To come up with that sort of goal is very important. I would say muchly more important in the last 2 years, when a lot of us have been telecommuting, where a lot of us have been working from home or working from a home office or what have you. To have that line of separation is very important. I'll throw another one that's not even on this list. I've been telecommuting for a long time. One of the goals I had was I will not start my day until I shower and I put business clothes on like I am actually going to a physical office. That is important for the mindset, but also physically as well. Because for some weird reason, when you have a collared shirt or you're at least dressed business casual, that tells your mind and your function that you're doing something that is work related. If you're going downstairs in a pair of pajamas, not so much. Some people could pull it off. And for all of you that do, I give you all the credit in the world. Some of us can't pull that off. So to come up with some sort of boundary construct that is important for you to live your life, but also do what you're doing and, trying to do business, trying to do this, that's very important. So it's not only a recovery thing, but it is also your basic life sort of thing to come up with that sort of background, that sort of backbone, if you will. Let's take this one level further. What about this journey that I'm on? And then moreover, what about the next 6 months? 6 goals come to mind, and a little bit more specific in that. 1, I will weigh myself and monitor my body fat every week, maintaining my newfound healthy weight. There was a time in this journey where I was weighing myself every day, and in the beginning it was every day. Truth be told, there were times in the early beginning where it was maybe twice a day in the beginning because the weight was coming off massively fast once I was hitting that exercise once I stopped drinking, of course. But I think now all I really need to do is weigh myself once a week, measure the body fat once a week. That's 1. 2, I will track all my intake and exercise dietarily and physically to keep myself honest. Meaning I'm going to keep tabs of what's coming in, and I keep tabs of how much energy I'm exerting. And I still use Lose It to basically track everything. I've been using Lose It for the last 3 years. It is an incredible app. Not a sponsor, but definitely something that I use. You can also use something like MyFitnessPal or what have you. But it keeps me honest. Without question, it keeps me honest. 3rd, is something you might have heard already. I will abide by the marathon plan for Portland in October to finish 26.2 miles on October 2nd. So that marathon plan is becoming a lot more rigorous. Just went for an 11-mile run on Sunday. I'm due for a 12-mile run this coming Sunday. And as we go forward, there's going to be just longer and longer runs. I was telling someone earlier today that the 20-mile run that is scheduled before the marathon scares me. But I know that if I could have finished a 20-mile run, I know I could finish 26.2. Why is that, John? Let me explain. If you remember before the half marathon in March, that 13.1 miles, I expressed some sort of worry there as well. Now, not to mention I was also having problems with my hamstrings and problems with my legs and whatnot. But I know that if I could nail a 10-mile long run, all it would take me to get from 10 to 13.1 is a 10-mile long run and a 5K. Let's take that logic further. If I could run a 20-mile long run, then all I would need to do on top of the 20-mile long run is a 10K. And there you would have 26.2 miles. So it's a matter of just working up to it, but in the most sort of calm, logical, but directive sort of way with a plan. We work better with plans. So to have that in a plan absolutely helps. Number 4, I will lift weights and do HIIT 3 times a week and do other forms of cardio at least 4 times a week. This is foundational, especially if I'm doing something like wanting to run marathons and road races and other things. It basically, 1, keeps me healthy, but 2, gets me stronger every single time. It is now in 2022 for me about as brass tacks can be. Right? Try to work out at least an hour to 2 hours a day. Sometimes rigorous, sometimes very calming. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing is I will journal and meditate daily to be free with my mind and the universe. Something I've done since midway through the first year of this journey, and I continue to do every single day. Tied to that would be number 6. I will complete the editing of the book and self-publish to tell this story to the masses. Because it's about outreach, right? You've lived this story, you lived the different components of these stories, you learn all these lessons, you should be able to express that. I do it by way of this live stream. I'm also doing it by way of a book. A couple of comments popped up as I was going through that list. Let me go through that real quickly. Oh, it's just one. Jamie asks, why do they do a 26.2 and not an even 26? That has something to do with, in 1900, I believe it might have been the first marathon of the modern Olympics, where the marathon was a 26-mile race, but it was designed to end at the Queen's balcony. So that distance between 26 miles and the Queen's balcony, the Queen's, the castle, is 0.2. So that's why every marathon since then, has been 26.2. As far as a half marathon, you just have that 13.1, but that's why 26.2 is the basically the distance of a marathon. Good question, Jamie. I appreciate that. So it's one thing to have these lists of goals, but you might be asking yourself, well, how do you start? How do you start coming up with these goals? How do you come up with these things? Before I start getting to a list, let me be honest about something. And I kind of alluded to this before. As far as losing the weight and coming up with the constructs of how to do that, there are two things that are flying underneath. One, I have an idea of how to do it. Did it before twice, and I just gained it all back. So I know the construct underneath that. But the second thing is, I truly was hitting a bottom. When you can't move, when your health is very decrepit, that's about as bottom can be as far as morbid obesity, let alone type 4 morbid obesity. If we can come up with plans that work ourselves around these things well before hitting that bottom, the better we are living our life. The better we are aware, the better we can do things to help us. And when we can help ourselves, we can help everybody else. But how do we start? One way to do this, and this came out of Medium, great list, by the way, or great sort of piece of advice here. Create a list of 50 goals you would like to achieve in any realm. The caveat being that you complete the goal better than you were entering it. So basically, you're not going to come up with some sort of arbitrary goal that's just there for laughs. If you can create a goal that you end up better than what you were before it, that is an ideal goal. Then you ask yourself this. From 1 to 5, how achievable is the goal? From 1 to 5, how exciting is the goal? You want to be interested in it. You want to be able to drive this through. But from two perspectives, right? You want to talk about it from the short term, but you also want to talk about it from the long term as well. Really think about that. Then you have to ask yourself this. Can this goal be part of my new normal? Can this be part of my life? Can I see myself doing this for the rest of my life? That's a very feasible question. You should be able to ask yourself that. Then, as we say, the whole thing of taking care of two birds with one stone, will this goal help you with any other goal or life in general? If you have a goal that can take care of 3 or 4 things in the same goal, that should gravitate closer to the top, now shouldn't it? Not to say that there's a difference between a unitasker and a multitasker, but if you can get a goal that could take care of multiple things, well, you're definitely doing something that's a lot more gravitating to the top of any sort of goal list. Of the list of 50, pick the top 5 and write a plan for a bucket of time, say 6 months. Continue to journal about the list and keep yourself honest. So we always talk about how important journaling is. This is one of the reasons. When you're trying to figure out what the next best thing or the next thing for you to tackle is, journaling definitely borns a lot of these ideas. So you definitely need to journal about it, and continuously, daily. There's more to that. 6 months at a time? No. 1 month at a time? No. 1 week at a time? Yeah. 1 day at a time? Always. In order to achieve any goal, as some of you in this audience know, we should get the education needed to achieve the goals, or at least to provide the background for the goals. Whether it's our friends or mentors or going to Udemy or Google University or the treasure trove of various online sources out there where you can learn incredible things. Education's power. The good news about 2022 is you don't necessarily have to go to the library per se, or enroll in a series of classes in a brick and mortar university to get there either. The ability to learn has become easier and easier and easier. So be resourceful and make yourself at it. Figure out the things you want to learn and make that part of the plan. Education is important for any plan you take. Let's take weight loss for a second. Continuously doing research and figuring out the latest trends as far as weight loss is concerned. Of course, doing it in the most prudent manner whatsoever, not necessarily any sort of fly-by-night article on Google that you might find just floating out there. But something that has complete research that might be founded, thank you, John, by the NIH or by any sort of medical board, definitely helps. If you could find that article in, say, the New England Journal of Medicine, even better. But doing research, but doing it in the most prudent way possible is the best thing you could possibly do. But the research is available out there. The knowledge is out there. Once you have that educational base, the next thing you do is you write an action plan. You have it tackling it in sprints. It's an agile term. So we talk about agile project management. We talk about things in 2-week blocks, and we refer to them as sprints. Well, they could be in sprints, or they could be in mini sprints. So basically 1-week blocks. Heck, if you want to tackle it down to the time blocks on a given day that you're doing it, and you tackle it something we call a Pomodoro, which is a 25-minute block of time, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, then do that. The bottom line is you're putting a bucket of time around the work that you're doing to get closer to your goal. So the best thing you can do is come up with a plan about that in whatever cadence that makes sense. But the key is there has to be a cadence, and you have to keep yourself accountable and honest. At the end of the day, if you don't do that, the only person you're cheating is yourself. Third thing would be journaling on this daily. So a daily journal entry is important. They could be video journal entries, they could be audio journal entries, they could be what have you. But you should journal on it every single day. And at the end of the week, you take the notes from the week, the lessons learned, the successes, and the roadblocks, and you reflect upon it. You keep yourself accountable on a daily sort of basis, on a weekly sort of basis. And then at the end of the cycle, at the end of the 6 months, you do a retrospective. You figure out these were the things that worked, these were the things that didn't. This is how the goal has come into play. This is how it's now become part of my daily routine or my life. And now this is what I'm going to do to plan the next cycle. That is taking a goal or a set of goals and coming to a conclusion in the most educated but most researched way possible. It's more than just pouring a bucket of ice water over your head for, charity, right? A goal has a lot of sort of after effects to it. A goal has a lot of good things that come out of it. We learn things from the goals that we achieve, or at least building them too. So to go through this sort of exercise is the best possible thing you can do, without question. I'm going to go back to Maine for a second. Paul Burke, co-host of VF Talks on Friday nights. Good to see you, Paul. Paul says goal setting is a great topic, really helpful. Thank you, Paul. Good to see you this evening. So back, as I was alluding to before, on New Year's Day of 2020, there was an article out of one poll that was published in the New York Post. And this was just a poll of what goals do you want to achieve in 2020? And there's a list of about 15 to 20 of them, and we could take a look at that, but you'll notice one thing in common. And reminder, this was before everything became crazy in February of 2020. So remember the time and context before we start going through this list. Get finances in order, get out of debt, learn something new, get more organized, exercise more, travel more, buy a new home, do something nice for myself, learn a new skill, buy a new car, lose weight, volunteer more often, disconnect from technology, remodel my home, quit my vices, redecorate my home, cook more frequently, organize my closet, bring a pet into the family. These are things that we gravitate to each and every year. I would think within the last couple of years, with everything becoming the new normal and we do things very differently, the list looks, you start thinking about the list a bit more. But the one thing I'll say that kind of gravitates to me is the fact that it doesn't talk to any sort of construct on how you would achieve those sort of goals. It's just a one-liner in 4 to 6 words. And it requires a lot more than a 4 to 6 word phrase to achieve what you really want. And I'm going to start tackling that by taking, for example, buy a new home. That's why it's in yellow. Paul says, I'm trash at goal setting, so this is really good. I'm glad you're taking this in, Paul. I appreciate it. I gotta be honest. At one time in my life, I was horrible at this too. This is not an easy skill to take up, but once you get the knack of it, life becomes a lot easier, and then you find yourself tackling a lot more. It's complicated, but once you get into the routine of how to do this and you keep yourself accountable, a lot of good things happen. So let's take the example of buying a new home. You have to say to yourself, are they goals that are just there as a 4 to 6 word phrase, or did they have smart objectives tied to it? And as you can see in that list of 20, there wasn't any sort of smart objective tied to it. What would be the smart objectives for any of that list? Think about that yourselves and tell me that in the comments if you like. But let's take, for example, what buying a home would be if we tied some smart objectives to it. For example, you could say, I'm going to save $3,000 for a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Westminster within the next 6 months. There you have the timeliness. There you have the mission and the sort of reason why you're doing it. You have it all together in one good goal statement with a very sizable objective. In order to help facilitate that, you come up with other objectives. So, for example, I'm going to meet with at least 3 realtors within the next 2 weeks to decide who has the most experience with the area and best serves as a buyer's agent. There are some areas of the country where your agent could be both the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. But if you're in a situation where you just need a buyer's agent, that becomes a very important question. You need someone who is well-versed in being a buyer's agent, especially if you're going to make a large real estate transaction. Third, you may want to meet with a credit repair agency on a monthly basis for the next year while saving $750 a month in order to buy a home 18 months from now. If your credit isn't the greatest, say it's in the low 600s or the mid 600s, you may want to do things to improve that credit before you go down the road of putting down a down payment or negotiating for a mortgage or finding 3 or 4 homes that make sense and then going into the bidding wars as we do in 2022, because it's still a bit of a buyer's market, but it's starting to turn the other way because of the interest rates going up. But you're doing the sort of things underneath it to get to your goal. Now notice that those 3 things are a lot more complicated than buying a new home, is it? But it puts together the thought that is necessary in order for you to buy a new home. So that sort of thought process, that sort of objective writing is very important. But we go back to what we were saying before. It is smart. It is measurable. It is actionable. It is results driven. It is timely. It is smart or specific. Those are components within all those objectives. And it helps you get to the goal of buying a new house. So think about the list that we showed previously. And think about how you would make those goals smarter. Yeah, a little bit of a pun intended there, but think about that. When we think about what we talk about on the show, sometimes quit my vices might be a very good one to construct a recovery plan or a goal behind that. So it's a nice list, but when we think about the goals that we have to achieve, it's going to require a lot more than a 4 to 6 word phrase about what I want to do in year XYZ. It takes a lot more thought. And that's where journaling really comes into play. I think of myself back in 2019, especially when I took maybe the most awful picture for a badge, when I went through these sort of situations where I really wasn't happy with my life, wasn't happy with my physical nature, wasn't happy going home, wasn't happy doing a lot of things. And it took that bottom, a nervous breakdown, for me to start working at these things. Fortunately, I had a good understanding of how to start constructing these things. Yeah, when you do it all the time for your day job, you could somewhat affect it for your personal life as well. I'm really glad I did. So if you think about this one piece at a time, one day at a time, you can go very far with this, no matter what the goal is. So that said, I think we must remember that no matter what we do, whether it's a long-term effort or something that is a goal or a project, we must learn that it is very important and absolutely okay to be agile. Agility is the most important thing we have. Whether we're talking about our lives, our personal lives, whether we're talking about our personal projects, or whether we're talking about things we do for our jobs, whether we're in project management or IT or what have you. Agility is very, very important. So the June 28th journal entry for Language of Letting Go talks to when things don't work. But I put a parenthetical there. I said, i.e., your goal should be agile. So your goal should be agile, or as the journal entry says, when things don't work. And it goes something like this. Frequently, when faced with a problem, we may attempt to solve it in a particular way. When that way doesn't work, we may continue trying to solve that problem in that same way. We may get frustrated, try harder, get more frustrated, and then exert more energy and influence into forcing the same solution that we have already tried and that didn't work. Basically square hole, round peg, that sort of thing. If it doesn't work, sometimes we have to follow this advice. That approach makes us crazy. It tends to get us stuck and trapped. It is the stuff that unmanageability is made of. We can get caught in the same difficult pattern in relationships, in tasks, in any area of our life. We initiate something, it doesn't work, doesn't flow, we feel badly, then try the same approach harder, even though it's not working and flowing. Sometimes it's appropriate not to give up and to try harder. Sometimes, though, it's more appropriate to let go, detach, and stop trying so hard. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't flow, maybe life is trying to tell us something. Life is a gentle teacher. She doesn't always send neon road signs to guide us. Sometimes the signs are more subtle. Sometimes not working in itself may be a sign. Let go. if we have become frustrated by repeated efforts that aren't producing desired results, we may be trying to force ourselves down the wrong path. Sometimes a different solution is appropriate. Sometimes a different path opens. Often, the answer will emerge more clearly in the quietness of letting go than it will in the urgency, frustration, and desperation of pushing harder. Learn to recognize when something isn't working or isn't flowing. Step back and wait for clear guidance. Today, I will not make myself crazy by repeatedly trying solutions that have proven themselves unsuccessful. If something isn't working, well, I'll step back and ask for guidance and wait for it. And that is the language of letting go. It's okay to be agile. It's very okay to be agile. Sometimes we have to listen for that nuance. Sometimes we have to listen for what life is trying to tell us, what life is trying to show us. But it is more than okay to be agile about these things. That is how we grow. And by taking that time, that in itself can be the most important lesson we ever come across. Sometimes we have to let go. What are we doing on the next episode is important. So I want to talk about this, and just a little bit of a programming note. There won't be an episode on Thursday, and there won't be an episode on Tuesday. The next episode of The Venture will be 1 week from Thursday, July 7th, at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. But when we get there, we're going to do an episode called On the Next Venture, or The Next Venture. And this is an episode that I've gotten a lot of emails about, that they've wanted to see this. I'm really glad to start showing something about it. On the next venture, I start talking about the book. It's a concept I have looked for and written about, be this the first glimpse through obesity 3 times, alcoholism, gambling addiction, divorce, bankruptcy, multiple sclerosis, and the trials and tribulations of life. It's my story. It's been everything we've been talking about on this show. In the book, there'll be poetry, there'll be life stories, there'll be life lessons, there'll be my quirky sense of humor, there'll be tears, but most importantly, there'll be me. And we'll start having our first glimpse into this book 1 week from Thursday. Thursday, July 7th, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Some final comments before we put a giant bow on this. Rollo is joining us on YouTube. Good evening, Rollo. Hope you are doing well. She says, well, I'm glad I stopped in to hear that. Glad you're here, Rollo, as always. And Rollo says, hi, folks, and have a safe holiday weekend. Rollo, I hope you have a safe holiday weekend yourself. Before we play the theme music and everything, I just wanted to, we won't be on Thursday night, but I wanted to wish my Aunt Hope a happy birthday. It's her birthday on Thursday night, and we are having dinner with her, so I wanted to wish her a happy birthday here on the show. But we're thinking of you. We love you, and we'll be out to see you for a happy birthday on Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to do what we normally do on Friday nights. We'll have a conversation about anything and everything with Matt Haas, Paul Burke, and all of you at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. But until next time, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward and VF Talks. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong, stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you again Friday night for VF Talks at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. Take care of yourselves. I love you all, and fly, be free.